My name is Anna Gortman Lopez, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. And we are very privileged and happy to have Joel DiGirolamo joining us. He's the Director of Coaching Science from the ICF, and he will today be presenting for us on the case for coaching, what the research tells us. So, Joel, welcome. We're so happy to have you, and please take on from here.
Thank you, Anna. It's a real pleasure to be here with everyone, and it's really an honor. Thank you. I appreciate being invited. So I'm sort of one of the research guys out there in the field of coaching, and that's what I want to talk about today, is some of the research that's out there and hopefully give you a few nuggets that will be helpful to you in your practice, and also maybe give you a little bit of background in research. It seems like most people have their video off. So I'm really curious, how many of you have done some research? So if you could just put in the chat that you've done qualitative research or you've done quantitative research, that'll be helpful to me, and I'll kind of watch that as it's going across. But that kind of level sets me on how technical or how researchy I can get. So let's go ahead and get started. So the case for coaching, what does the research show us? So that's the big question here. And what I'm going to talk about, get my screens organized here, is one-to-one professional coaching. What is the efficacy around that? Managers and leaders using coaching skills. We've done quite a bit of work in that area, and there's some research there that I'll talk about, as well as team coaching. We came out with the team coaching competencies last year, and that was about an 18-month or a year and a half long project. So that was pretty extensive. And then I'm going to talk about looking ahead, what the future brings us, and I'm going to have a theme on this, and so we're gonna do a few exercises first to get us started. So let's do an exercise on before you even coach, before you even start coaching, what has to happen? What has to be there? So we're going to go into small breakout groups of about 5 people, and we're going to give you 4 minutes to answer this question in your group, and then we'll have a few people report out for successful coaching outcomes before it even starts, what must be in place. So what did you find? What are your thoughts? What needs to happen before the coaching even starts?
The will.
The will? What does that mean?
The will to meet the coach.
Okay. All right. Good. Elizabeth, thank you. What else?
So I think we also discussed that we should be clearing the space and be present. So some mindful deep breathing and clearing our own thoughts so that we can be more present as coaches in the session.
Okay. Okay, that's excellent and important.
The same in our group. It's exactly the same. We talked about that too.
So that you need to clear yourself and be ready to be present, to be in a good state of mind.
And give the client time to get into that mood too.
The chatter in the mind. The chatter needs to.
Yep.
In the client.
For you, as a coach.
Both,
as a coach.
Both in our group. We said both.
Okay. Okay. What else?
We talked about getting an alignment of expectations at the beginning of the session, sort of, or at the beginning of a program, trying to understand what would be the prioritization and what would be most valuable, and what wants the focus to be on. And then also, we talked about the idea of having a bit of a structure in mind, but with content, but you could go off of that if you want to. But having kind of a map of you know, where you're going a bit in terms, okay, if a person wants to work on executive presence, having some thoughts around that or material to show them or something.
Okay. So all these things are really good and helpful, but there's still something that could stop the process that nobody's mentioned yet.
Well, when the need to have like a will to develop, I don't know if we said that before, but they need to have like the will to like develop themselves.
The client.
Yeah, the clients.
Mm.
I think it's also necessary to have a coaching agreement, to have clarity on a topic to be explored, and also on an outcome that coachee, that client wants to reach with that topic. And excuse me for sometimes falling away, but I'm here on 4G, very, very bad connection. So I hope that you hear me, Joel.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Carl. Karen, so let's go back to you. So tell me more about this willingness.
To develop?
Yes.
Well, it doesn't actually have to be that way, but I think it's much more easier if you start with that, if you start with the motivation, the client's motivation and will to develop, but you don't know in the beginning how much you want to develop, because when you start challenging the client, yeah, well, you know, all of you, you know that conversation can be, well, too challenging sometimes, and they like, how do you say that in English, like back and don't want to go that way, and you need to like take another way, and yeah, you know, but the ground, like the will and the curiosity to do something about their situation. I think I mean that.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of times we use the word coachability, right? And so it's like somebody has a big helmet on their head and they're not going to change. You can't get through there, right? So if a client has no interest in changing, or what we typically call coachability, then how effective are we going to be as a coach? So I believe that coaches can be what's called a moderator to this, and that they can enhance the client's coachability and get them to be more coachable. But if the client doesn't want to do anything, then is anything going to happen? No. No. I think probably most of the people on the screen, I don't know how, you know, people do it different ways, but, you know, I term it having to fire a client because they don't want to do the work. They're not interested. So in research for our group, we call this likelihood to change. So let me get my slides back up here. So it's the client likelihood to change. And the reason we call it likelihood to change rather than coachability is that in research, we have to compare, say, a control group with the coaching group. And so the control group, you can't say they weren't coachable, but you could say how likely are they to change. And with the clients in the coaching group, you can say the same thing. So that's a term that we tend to use, is likelihood to change. But that's number one. That's before the coaching even starts. Now, a lot of these other things that were mentioned are very important too. Being centering yourself, grounding yourself, being reflective, having a reflective practice, and that's certainly where supervision can play a big part as well. So you can think of a client as being this semi-truck and hard to move, right? You can also think of the client, if they're very nimble, and they're this track bicycle that can move very quickly and turn very quickly, you know, those are kind of two perceptions that you might have on the clients. Okay?
Joel, is it okay for me to add something, or would you like to continue the session?
If it's quick, Carl, sure.
Yeah. I would not take the so-called non-coachability or non-changeability of the coachee. I would not take that for granted too quickly. I mean, my experience certainly with executive coaching, where you coach directors and managers that have difficulty with the idea of being coached, is that when you take the time to have a good intake of 1 hour, 2 hours, when you also explore that topic of coachability, that things can change quickly. So that the idea to be wanting to change should already be present before the coaching starts. I have a slightly moderate view on that. You can connect quite quickly, and you can explore that attitude quite quickly. Thank you.
Yes, and that's what I mean by that coaching can be a moderator. So in research, we talk about mediators and moderators. And a moderator, think of a volume control on an amplifier. So with the volume control, you can turn up the volume or you can turn it down. So what Carl's talking about is that with a client, if a client is saying, well, I don't need to change, my boss needs to change or something. And then, as Carl says, you can ask questions, you can start digging in and trying to understand the situation, and you can find out where the likelihood to change might be. So yes, that's exactly right. And so this is why I want to bring this up, because I think it's a really important element of coaching, and I'll show you how this all ties in together. So let's go ahead and go to our next exercise. So the first coaching action. So now you're actually coaching for a successful outcome. What has research shown to be an important first step? This is the first step in the coaching. Okay, so we'll do 4 minutes again. We'll send you to your breakout rooms. I think this was a pretty easy exercise for everyone. Okay, so that one worked. The helmet didn't.
It did.
Now you're done it, Joel. We're all gonna show our strength now.
Yeah.
Just sitting here silently judging you. That's how we've been doing.
Right.
Okay, so what were some of the things that came up in your breakout room? Thorsten?
Confidentiality and contracting.
Okay. What else?
What else? To establish some sort of contact that you can start to build trust.
Trust.
But but you have to talk about something when you build that trust also. So maybe you have a small chat, or maybe you start to talk about expectations and so. But the important is that you, together with what you talk about, that you also build a feeling of trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who else?
So from our group, Joel, I think it's we provide the clients safe place.
Safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to make sure that they to make sure he or she able to explore themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So excellent. So we learned this early on, that relationship is so important, right? So the question I have, let me ask this question. So some of you may have heard of brief coaching or brief therapy, Peter Szabo and a few other folks have written about it a fair amount. They don't really work on relationship a lot. If you read their material, there's not a whole lot about relationship building in it. And that got me to thinking. So the question I have is, why is relationship important?
For trust to be established?
Trust. Okay. Trust is very important.
You're co-working, so you have to be a partnership because you're co-working together.
Yes. Yes. Let's broaden this. Think more broadly into human behavior. What do you see in this picture? Well, there's a lot of things you see, but what do you see that might relate to coaching on a very broad scale?
There is bonding, there is belonging, there is
Yeah, belonging.
Mm-hmm. Belonging, yes. Mm-hmm. Belonging. So you either belong or you don't belong, right? And so we as humans, we as Homo sapiens, we had to learn who to trust. So we live in that village. We lived in these villages. We lived in these tribes for safety, right? That's in our DNA, that safety. Our tribe is our safe place. And we have to know, so these Vikings are here with their, well, they're pretend Vikings, right? But they're here with their axes and their helmets and their shields, and they have the wall that's in the background that's protecting their village, right? And so it's that safety, and you have to know right away, is this person safe or not? And somebody mentioned it in coaching: safety, empathy, trust. So there's some really good research. This paper by Willis and Todorova, the study from 2006, it's already got, I think, over 2,000 citations. And they found that within 100 milliseconds, within 1/10 of a second, people would judge traits of an individual just looking at their face: trustworthiness, competency, competence, likability, aggressiveness, and attractiveness. Now think about that as of us as coaches. You want to be trusted, right? You want them to see you as competent. You want them to like you. You want them to feel you as not being aggressive. And attractiveness, okay, that's a nice plus, right? So if you step back, it's really about in-group and out-group bias. And so with in-group and out-group bias, there's a lot of research around this. And we make decisions whether somebody is in our group and they're safe, we can work with them, we can talk with them, or they're not. And in coaching, relationship, fundamentally, all we're doing is trying to have that person feel that we're in the same in-group. Fundamentally, that's all we're doing. So we're trying to get them to feel safe. We have in-group bias for social bonds. That's why we like to go to the pub, or we like to go out to eat together. And together in groups, we can build things, and somebody mentioned that. So in coaching, there's the term co-creating, right? So creating things together, that's what the coach is doing with the client. So if we think in terms of this idea of relationship and coaching, you know, we talk about long-term relationships, we talk about developing rapport, but it really comes down to safety. And so I believe, I have no data on this, but I believe that maybe 80% of our human behavior is because of in-group behavior. We want to feel safe in that group. And we talk about the polarization of societies and populist movements and that sort of thing. And that's all that's about, is this in-group, out-group phenomena. So in terms of coaching, that's all you have to do as step one in the coaching, is to get the client to feel that they're in the same group. Let me stop sharing. Are there any questions here? So somebody says, in solution-focused brief therapy, there is relationship building in the questions that are asked using the language of the client, acknowledging what they express. Yes. Yes. But it's interesting because in some types of coaching, it's, you know, building, there's a lot of time spent on that, building the relationship. But with brief coaching, there's not so much in it. It is integrated. And you do try to get that client to feel safe. And so my point here is that if you think about the broadest construct, this broad construct of in-group, that's all you're trying to do. So when there's this idea of challenging the client, though, how do you handle that? Because you don't want to get the client to feel that you're now the foe, right? So what do? You have to, it's a push-pull kind of thing, right? You push them like, and you try to find their edge. So when we were redoing the one-to-one coaching competencies several years ago, we had the subject matter experts, the experienced coaches, write out what are called critical incidents of coaching. And they wrote over 280 critical incidents of where they would tell us the situation, they would tell us what happened, and then what the coach, what they were thinking, or what they knew the coach was thinking if it wasn't their particular session, and then what the outcome was. So what I did was I looked at, there's like 65 or 70 of these, and we also asked them to rate them 1 through 5, 5 being very profound and effective coaching sessions and or incidents. And I looked at 65 or 70 that were rated 5s, and there was a theme. And the theme was that the client was willing to open up. So you need to have the client feel safe enough to trust you enough to open up, to talk, and let you listen. And that's your next step as a coach. You have to listen, right? So that you can then evoke some kind of awareness with the client. Okay, so I have to admit I'm a little bit cynical in terms of spending a lot of time on relationship building, because it's this idea of keeping the client in the in-group, keeping them feeling safe, feeling that they can trust you. That's the ticket. And so once you understand that big construct, then it becomes a lot easier, because you don't have to think about what technique am I using, what tool am I using, how am I bonding with the client? Are they just feeling safe and open with me? That's all that needs to happen. And we're actually doing some research right now with very experienced coaches, trying to understand how they coach, what's different about coaching at a very high level versus a novice or a beginner coach. And one of the things we're seeing is this integration of all these things about, like, I don't know if it's Jesper, if that's how you say your name, that the work is all integrated together. You don't see discrete elements of, now they're relationship building, now they're asking a powerful question. It's all integrated together, and that's what takes so much work and so much effort to be a very experienced, sort of masterful coach. So if anybody's interested in more on this, there's a really, really good book is called the Robbers Cave experiment. And this is an experiment that I don't know if we could do this experiment again. It's another one of these, like the Seligman ones with the supposed voltage and everything. That what they did was they took two groups of kids and they assessed these kids, and they assessed them to see if they're normal, whatever normal is. And they sent them in two groups to a state park, and the park is called Robbers Cave. And that's why it's called the Robbers Cave experiment. And the two groups, they kept them apart, and they let them bond. They let them create their in-group. And they got together, and individually they bonded, they had rapport, they built things together, but they didn't know about the other group. So near the end of the first week, they let them see glimpses of each other. And they said, wait, there's another group out here. Who are these? Who are these guys? And they started to wonder, and they were getting curious. And then the second week, they put the groups together and they made them compete. And so what they did was they had baseball games, they had other kinds of games, and there was a lot of this, and there was almost physical fighting between the two groups, these groups of normal kids. And so then, so you had two in groups, you had out groups, right? And then they tried to put them together to get them to work together, and gave them problems that they could only solve together, to see if they could build that in group with the two groups. And to some extent they did. But it's a fascinating, I would encourage, if you have the slightest interest in this topic, I would encourage you very much to take a look at that book. It's really fascinating. Okay, so this idea of in-group, out-group will be the lens through which I would like to talk about the rest of the things. I haven't talked about anything I said earlier yet. So let's go back to likelihood to change and safety, what we talked about in the beginning. So those are what we call in research, we would call the antecedents to coaching. Because once that safety is established, that trust, then the real coaching can start, and then you can have some kind of positive outcome. Okay, that's a theory. Haven't really had a chance to get any data on this yet, but I'm working on a paper that goes into this in more detail. Okay, I'm frequently asked, how can we show people or tell people about the efficacy of coaching? So here are the two papers that I send people to. And these are what are called meta-analyses. So the first paper, Tim Tebow and his colleagues, they gathered a bunch of studies. I think it was 16 or 17 that they ended up using. So you start out with a big pile of papers and studies, and you whittle them down and say, these are the ones we're going to use for various reasons. And Tim and his group, they found that overall there were significant positive effects on performance and skills, well-being, coping, work attitudes, and goal-directed self-regulation. And the coaching is an effective tool. So these are two papers. The other one, Rebecca Jones and her group of colleagues did a really good study on workplace coaching that was also a meta-analysis. So these are doing a meta-analysis, sort of like you can do a lot of studies. This is a progression that you see in research, that there will be a lot of different studies sprinkled around, and then people will do a meta-analysis of studies that distills it all together and says, okay, here's what we have. If anybody is interested, I would encourage you to go out to our research portal. It's at this URL, researchportal.coachingfederation.org. We have over 3,000 references in there on coaching research, and we have many of the pieces in there. So that is available to you. It's available to anyone free of charge. There's a few reports in there that cost money, but for the most part, the references are free. If we have them, we don't always have the capability to share the material. Now, looking through that lens of in-group, out-group again, it's through this relationship, this building of the group, of the client and the coach together, one-to-one relationship, that makes this coaching effective. So we did some work on managers and leaders, how they use coaching skills several years ago. And we have a paper published in Consulting Psychology Journal, myself and Thomas Ketch, one of my colleagues. And what we did was it was what's called a mixed methods study. So we did some qualitative work, and I noticed in the chat that several of you have done qualitative work. So we did interviews of developers of coaching programs, for coaching skill programs for managers and leaders. And then we interviewed some managers and leaders themselves and the HR people who support them. And then we did a quantitative piece, and we asked team members to think back to a manager or leader who helped them the most with their job performance or their career development. And then we asked them the frequency of different elements of coaching skills, and then the importance of those. So for example, in the frequency, how often did this manager or leader make an effort to develop a collaborative and trusting relationship? So we know that as one of the competencies, as developing that trust and safety. Notice we didn't use the word coaching. We did not use the word coaching in any of these items or any of these questions. And what we found was good correlation between 9 of these coaching skills, frequency of use of the coaching skills, and engagement, which we know to be a very important element of organizational behavior, organizational performance. So organizations, a lot of you know this, are working toward having more engaged employees. Well, there was a correlation of the use of coaching skills and high engagement. There was higher working alliance. So we used a scale called the WAI, the Working Alliance Inventory. It's a very well-known and very well-established and validated scale. Oh, and the engagement scale was the Utrecht Work Engagement Scale from Utrecht in Holland. Some researchers there. And the third scale that we compared against was, that I'm reporting here, there were actually others, but a reduced intention to quit scale. So it was a short 3-item scale about how likely are you to quit your job or this organization, say in the next 12 months. So we saw a correlation there as well. So the question is, how is in-group, out-group bias related to this? It's very related, because what you're doing as a manager or leader, you're trying to build that trust. You're trying to build that rapport with the employees, with your team members, so that you can all work together. Remember I said building things together. So the team, the group can build things together. That's why it's so important. So, if you go back to the 1950s, 1960s, there was a lot of fear. Managers and leaders would manage or lead out of fear, saying you need to do this, X, you need to do this. And they were very directive. Today we have what's called participative. And so it's the manager or leader participating with the team member to build something together. So the paradigm has shifted. And we talk about this in the paper. The paradigm has shifted away from this directive end of the spectrum to this more participative end of the spectrum. And that's where this element of in-group can play in. Okay. So more recently, I talked about the team coaching competencies, and we announced them last fall, November, December timeframe. And there was a question about, well, why do team coaching? You know, what good is it? And what we found was that there were a lot of benefits. The teams could work together. They're trying to build the in-group. So if you have a team with factions, what we call factions, you may have within the team, you may have group A, group B, group C, and team coaching can help with that, to have all one group, so that you have the whole team as the in-group, and not within the team have an in-group and an out-group, and have the whole team working together. So that's this lens that I was talking about. So in the work that we did with many SMEs, some of you on the call actually helped with this work. We appreciate that very much. We're very, very grateful for all the wonderful input that we got and the help to create those team coaching competencies. We found that there was a team development umbrella. And so that there are actually many different team development modalities. And so what we did was try to make that real crisp, and that group of SMEs helped us with that. So the competencies themselves are here at this URL, team-coaching-competencies. And it's very clear that the benefits are higher performance and higher job satisfaction. So those team development modalities, these are the ones that we ended up with. So team coaching tends to be a longer term thing. It can be months long. And the team as a single identity partners with the coach. So in team coaching, the team is the client, not the individual team members, but the team. So they're working towards specific goals, and the team coach is working for the team to be that in-group and for them to be sustainable. So a team coach is wanting to work themselves out of a job. They want the team to be able to sustain themselves, and they want to be able to walk away and feel good, and likely that team can sustain themselves after they're gone. So the team, in team coaching, the team is the expert. They know what they need to do, and they need to be working and talking within themselves, not back and forth with the coach. There's team facilitation, which is another modality, but it's a little bit lighter, so you're facilitating dialogue here. You're not going as deep with facilitation. You're trying to achieve clarity and trying to understand what's of interest, what does the team want to do. So there's also team mentoring, team consulting, and team training, and these are different modalities where somebody, in the case of mentoring, is the mentor, consulting is the consultant, training, it's the trainer. They're bringing wisdom and knowledge, and they're sharing that with the team, and they're trying to help the team build up. With what's called team building, that's what's done frequently to build these bonds, to enhance those relationships among team members, to get them to feel like the in-group, all of them. So remember I talked about the Robbers Cave experiment and the two teams that they they built those bonds. That's what they were doing in that first week of that experiment. They were building the in-group. So with team coaching, you're trying to build the in-group with everybody there together. Okay. If you take a sociological view, so the sociologists, they tend to look at what they call a micro view, so the small view, or the macro view, the very large view, and then in between there's the meso view, right? And I think of the mezzanine in the department stores, right? There's sort of the mezzanine, that's that middle layer, and as a kid I was fascinated with the mezzanine. Why is there a mezzanine? What does that mean? Well, it's sort of in the middle, right? So if we take that sociological view and look at the impact of coaching, coaching at a one-to-one level has a micro impact, but that can ripple out. Sean O'Connor from Australia wrote a seminal paper in 2014, I think it was, he called it the ripple effect in coaching. And so as the individual client is changing and metamorphosing, transforming, then they can take that out and have a bigger impact. You can also think of going out into a broader scale, this idea of managers and leaders, and them using the coaching skills. So now a single manager or leader is impacting 10, 12, 20, 30 people at a time. So coaching skills are having a larger impact. Team coaching, same thing. The team coach is impacting everybody in the team. We're doing some work. We launched a survey on Sunday. It's a two-phase study on coaching culture. And so with coaching culture in organizations, you're now bringing coaching skills to the whole organization. And so that's going to have a more significant impact on more people. And then if you start going beyond your organization, you can go into personal relationships. We can go out in the community. Coaching skills are used in community development already. We had a session on this last month. And the community developers use coaching skills with the people in the communities, therefore broadening the impact of coaching skills or the use of coaching. And on a global scale, we could only imagine how big of an impact coaching can have on the planet. So looking ahead, so here is the URL for our survey. If you're involved or have been involved with coaching culture in organizations, we'd be very grateful if you would take the survey. It's a little bit lengthy. It's about 20 minutes, maybe 30, if you spend a lot of time thinking on each item. And the first phase is to assess what is important. What are important characteristics of a coaching culture, and what are the important values of a coaching culture? We'll take that, and I won't go into the technical details of how we're doing that, how that analysis will be done. We'll take that data back, and then our goal is to create a set of items, questions that you could use inside an organization. We'll validate that against engagement, again, like we did with managers and leaders, with working alliance inventory, and that intention to quit scale. So those 3 scales, we'll use those. We'll try to narrow it down to a small set of items. If we could narrow it down to 3 items, we would just be absolutely delighted. So if you could take that, we would be extremely grateful. Artificial intelligence coaching is something else that's out there. There are what are called chatbots, and a lot of coaches are really concerned about this. But I think it can enhance our profession, that it can be used in between. You have one session of human-to-human coaching. You have another session of human-to-human coaching. In between, the client can be chatting with the bot. And you can then, as a coach, you could look at those things. And what was the exchange? What was the client journaling? What happened in between sessions? And so what that can be doing is bringing coaching to a broader set of individuals. So I want to come back to this idea of in-group, out-group. So here's a group of two tribes having a skirmish. And this is where the in-group and out-group comes from. And we need to bond and build those in-groups. And that's the fundamental element when we're coaching. So what questions do you have? Here's my email address if anybody has one-to-one questions they would like, and I'll open it up for questions for the rest of the time. I'm all yours.
Thank you, Joel. And if you have a question, you can either just speak up or put it in the chat box. Jan, you had put a question in the chat box. Would you like to take it up, or should I just read it out for you? Yeah.
You can read it out. Do that.
Okay. Yeah. Jan was talking about the differences between coaching and other helping methods like mentoring and therapy, and he was wondering what would distinguish coaching from these others helping methods.
One of the distinctions that I use, there's a researcher, Corey Keyes, K-E-Y-E-S, did a lot of work on a sort of a bell curve of mental health of individuals. And so there's this bell curve, and Keyes broke the curve sort of into three sections. And the lower section are the people who are, I think the term was used, languishing. Those people need therapy. They need help. The people in the middle were called moderately mentally healthy. And then the people on the high end were thriving. So my view is I kind of break the line between the languishing and the moderately mentally healthy. And so the people who are in the moderately mentally healthy or the thriving category, those are the ones for which coaching is really beneficial and really helpful. So there's, we wrote a white paper, Alicia Hullinger and I, Alicia did the vast majority of the work on that, on how to refer clients to therapy, because this is and how to tell the distinction of when should you be doing coaching, when should the person be doing therapy, and then how should you make that referral. The kind of the net where we ended up was, it's how well can the individual do their what's called ADL, activities of daily living. And if they have problems with the activities of daily living, then they need to be doing some therapy. Otherwise, coaching is very appropriate to them. Now, it's really fascinating when I've talked to people who've been therapists and are coaches as well, that frequently what I will hear is that they feel they can do more with coaching than they can with therapy. And they understand very well that distinction in that line. And then there's the question about, can you do therapy as well as coaching with the same individual if you're both? If you're both a therapist and you're a coach. And I question that, but I know some people do it. I'm not going to judge and say it's wrong or right, but there is a lot of that. We as researchers, there is a lot of overlap between coaching research and therapy research. And so when I see a lot of papers, research papers before they're published as an editor in a journal. And there's a lot so what you see that's published is 30% of what's researched. And so, I get to see the 70% that doesn't make it. And there is a fair amount that doesn't make a good distinction there between therapy and coaching, and that's really problematic. There's, if anybody has further interest in this, there's what's called the Heart and Soul of Change project. And Bruce Wampold, Barry Duncan were involved in that. And there was a book, they published 2 books. You want the 2010 edition of the Heart and Soul of Change project. And absolutely fascinating studies on what causes change. And this idea about likelihood to change in the client, they talk about that in there. There's also a lot of work done by some researchers, Gassman and Klaus Grau from, he was from Bern, Switzerland. There was this Bern School of Psychology, and Klaus Grau, he sadly is no longer with us, but he and Leslie Greenberg and a lot of other people did a lot of really good research on what causes these changes. And so there is a lot of crossover in the research, and it's very helpful. Jan, what was the other part of your question?
The other part is, as you mentioned, the moderately mental healthy and the thriving people, we can be buyers of coaching, mentoring, therapy, consultancy. And so far, the definitions of coaching that I normally see kind of could be used also for counseling or mentoring. Mm-hmm. So I'm still looking for how well have the coaching industry, represented by ICF, defined coaching to separate it from the older neighbors. And the relevance of this question seems to be growing since more and more countries regulate coaching as a profession. And the regulators seem to be inspired much by non-coaches.
Yes, and one of the distinctions I make is that, our understanding is that with therapy, you're looking into the past a lot more, and you're looking at and the therapist will frequently look for the root causes of what it is that's bothering the individual. And with coaching, we're more forward looking. How can we affect some change? And therapists are doing that too, but with coaching, there's more spent on this transformation of moving forward than looking back at the past. And that's kind of, I think about Freud and all his work digging into your childhood and your mother issues and all this stuff. And coaches, we don't need to be doing that, and we don't really care about that. So, but we look at what's moving forward, what can be helpful. So that's kind of one of the things that I think about is we're not looking at the past so much, we're looking more at moving forward. Does that help?
It does help. I've been reflecting, if coaching in larger more than the other professions, coaching might be better in circulating the coachee's words than the non-coaches. So coaching might look like more a circular process compared to our older neighbors. We might be more linear. Let's say you want to give feedback, some of the help gets into the coachee, and the coachee talking back to me, and I get some of the words, but not all. So it's more linear versus circular. So I'm trying to look at the really essence of news that coaching actually has brought to the world.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and where I frequently come back to is we as Homo sapiens are complex creatures, and it's messy. Yeah. And as Anna noted in my bio, my first career was as an engineer. And an engineer, things were pretty simple. I could identify this mug, right? It has a size, it has a density. Can't do that with humans. Homo sapiens, we're messy. So in engineering, we would be looking for correlations of 0.9, 0.95. I took my first psychology class and they were talking about correlations of 0.3, and 0.3 was considered good. And I'm like, that's horrible. But that's the best we can do with these Homo sapien brains that we have. So it's fascinating. I think we better go on, Anna.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. But yeah, we do have other questions here as well. For example, from Elizabeth saying, a lot of times people that are burned out reach out for coaching because they want to change their situation. I think that is a tricky one, since burnout syndromes can be something for therapy. Or do you have anything on that?
Yes, and burnout is, it's been a problem for a long, long time. And I've delved into some of that research. Maslach, she's done some really good research in that area. And where I think coaching can help is that with coaching, you can help the person to focus. What are their goals? What do they want? What's their passion? What do they want to do? We're all overloaded with too much to do these days, too much input, too much stuff coming at us. And so this idea about setting boundaries, setting filters, what comes in, and then making the choices what to do to move forward. That can be done in coaching. It doesn't have to be in therapy. So again, it's about choices and about moving forward and helping the client to understand, what do you really want to do? What do you really want to achieve? And I know for me, this is top of mind a lot, because I'm getting up in years. My wife would like me to retire, and I'm like, well, okay, I could retire, but then what would I do? I'm not going to sit around and go fishing. I live on a lake, but I'm not going to go fishing. My mind will turn to mush, and I'm not doing that. So I have to ask myself, what am I passionate about? What do I want to do? And I have to keep moving forward and to be happy in my life. And that's something we can do as coaches, and not get burned out in the process. And so setting those filters and those boundaries. Filters and boundaries, I think those are two key words in burnout. Really, what do you filter out? What do you just ignore? What is not making you happy in your life? And then boundaries in terms of what you'll let people ask you to do and what you'll agree to do.
All right. I'm trying to keep out of participating in the conversation since I'm supposed to be facilitating, but it's really difficult to not give my input on this, because I'm also a therapist and a coach. So I see this from both sides, and I'm thinking, well, it really depends on what are the meanings that the person has for the burnout, for example. It depends on what significance the person brings to this and how much responsibility a person takes. So I would think that whether you work with therapy or you work with coaching depends on where the client is and how much responsibility and activity the person is willing to take. So sorry, I won't.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Anna.
It's hard to stay in this facilitator's role. Right. So we had also an earlier question, and please go on, put on your questions in the chat box still if you would like to. There was one question from Hira, I guess, about how could one or two egoistic people in a team coaching be managed?
Oh, wow. I've done a little bit of team coaching in the past. It's been, many years ago. And so I don't know that I can really give a definitive answer. I can tell you that you can, so let me step back to the idea, and one of the things that was really impressed on us when we did the research into the team coaching, that the team is the client. So you have to be extremely careful about picking out individuals in the team and talking to them individually, because then now you can break that trust of, is this coach working for the team, or are they working for the individual, or for the leader, for the organization? So that's a slippery slope, as we would say. You have to be careful going there. I think if it were me, I would probably talk to the team leader and ask them, do you want to have a one-to-one conversation with these people? And it's like how I would do with individual clients, and I'm not an expert coach. I will fully admit that. But for example, with my team members, I always come back, or anybody that I'm working with, always come back to, what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to work together toward? So in group, I said that's the theme. That's our lens for today. We're here as a group. What are we working as a group toward to create? So for those people who have egos, I mean, you can, if they're speaking up a lot in the group, you can be throwing it back to the rest of the group. But again, I'm not an expert team coach, so I don't, and I'm hesitant to open it up here to somebody else, because then what might happen is that'll end up taking the whole rest of our 14 minutes. But that's a real. Pardon?
Jesper here, may I add to that? I do occasionally team coaching as well, and if we have, I'm a bit of a context freak. Like you said, Joel, you need to have, what's the goal? What's the purpose of us being together? What is it the team want to achieve? And if I have special individuals who sticks out in some way, I think it's the most easiest way is to embrace them with a context. So what you want to do, how does that benefit the team, and what the team wants to or needs to achieve? So simply ask that question, and if they can argument for it in a very well way, I might perceive it as, hey, now they're running away, they're doing another direction that we agreed on. But if they can argue with that, you can pull them in the team, and the team can maybe decide, being the experts, okay, so these, in this case, two individuals, they're actually having some good points. So maybe the team should embrace that and incorporate it, or it becomes more clear that this is not benefiting the team. So we should do something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds great to me. Yeah, Anna?
Yeah, we have another question here from Grant Calder, who says, what do you see as most interesting impact, value, and developments with coaching digital tools or platforms and software which supports human coaching?
Wow, I think the platforms are absolutely fascinating, because they can do so much for you. They can, and there's many different platforms out there, and they have many different functions. So some of them are working on AI, artificial intelligence. Inspired, that's not the right word, but they're artificial intelligence driven assessments. So the client can be journaling, and from those journals, the platform can give you information about the client at a higher construct level, maybe personality level. And the platforms can help you. You can read the client's journals. You can get more business through directories. You can, for the ones that have a bot, as I mentioned before, the bots could be working with the client in between session. I've seen a demo of one of these bots, and it wasn't too bad. It really wasn't too bad. It was pretty interesting. So the impact, I think the impact of the platforms is that they can help coaches be more productive. And that, you know, some coaches say they're afraid of AI coaching, that it's going to take our market away. But I think we need to have the concept that they're an adjunct or a complement to human coaching. And how can we work with them, and how can we use them to help us to be more productive and helpful to the client as a human coach. Value, so the value, I talked about that a little bit, and then, you know, just being able to enhance our productivity.
Right. It's exciting to accompany the developments in this field. It doesn't look like we have any new questions here. There was something about the use of notes. Yeah. Go ahead.
I thank you. I had a bit maybe a long question in the chat. I made it after this morning, early morning seminar, ICF seminar, and it's regarding the role and function of note taking, coach taking personal notes during coaching, mentoring, or team coaching. When I ask that question to coaches, they normally say, no, you don't take notes. I should not take notes. But when it comes to the basic of it, I did an unscientific research among my 15 last MCC coaches in the reciprocal system. All of them say they do not take notes, but I noticed they had I saw the pen going like here and have their eyes on the table. And it seemed like 100% of these 15 out of 15, they do take notes. And I asked them to send me their notes. And they take something between 0.2 and 10 pages of notes during online 45-minute session. My question is, are you familiar with any research regarding note-taking, best practice of note-taking, since it seems like it's a blind zone? Because also coaching schools say don't take notes, they don't mention it often, and then almost all their students continue to take notes, at least when it comes to online. And the question is especially regarding the safe making and the relationship building during a coaching session. That's a long question.
It's a great question. I know when I coached, I took notes. I did not take prodigious notes, but I would take a few notes because and it was mainly to help me remember from session to session. Mm. What I found and what I've seen, what I've observed, is that when you're taking notes, it takes away from presence. Mm. And so to your point, if you know, I'm looking down, you know, I'm not looking at you. And the bad thing about Zoom and, you know, all the online stuff is you can't tell if I'm looking you in the eye or not. And that's the thing that disturbs me the most, because I like to look people in the eye so that they know that I am present there for them. And when you're taking notes, then you can't do that. So I don't know of any best practices, whether you should take notes or shouldn't take notes. To me, I think if an individual could maintain it all up here from session to session, fantastic, you know, without notes. I think that'd be fantastic. But not everybody is gifted with a really, really good memory.
if I could follow up on that, from the 15 FCC coaches that coached me, my impression was those with almost no note-taking, they did put more of their things into the coaching. They kind of put their intuition into my coaching session instead of helping me develop my intuition. So maybe their short memory is not so good, but and it seems like the average note-taking was about 3 pages. I asked David Clutterberg this question last month, and he also had a no but yes question. He said, no, I don't take notes. Then after a second answer, I do not take, I do not mind mapping, he said, and remembering. So I think this is a blind zone. It's worth to look more into, since it influences the ICF core competencies or the effects of it.
You know, there's the other thing that comes to mind, Jan, is that, and what I used to do sometimes, well, a lot, was I wouldn't take prodigious notes during the session, but as soon as the client left or we got off the phone or whatever, then I would take more notes. Because then I could be, A, it's fresh, and B, I could be more present for the client. Because I think that is extremely important. And as we're doing our data gathering with expert coaches right now, we actually have 2 projects on that. What we're seeing is, and what maybe isn't so important are all these notes, because it's what's important for the client in this moment. And what does this client need to do to move forward in this moment? So, you know, we see with expert coaches so much of this integration of all this stuff. And to me, note-taking kind of falls into the tool and technique category. And so we have found that tools and techniques don't really matter so much, or, you know, which tool or technique is used, but what matters is that a given tool or technique is used at the appropriate time, at a really important time. Yeah, it's a good topic. I can understand the question and understand why it's there. I would just ask yourself what you're doing in service to the client.
Can I jump in and say I missed one question, and so I would like to give you maybe 2-3 minutes to give some answer to that. The question is, what's SME's roles in team coaching? Are they providing, or are they providing technical solutions for a specific issue, something like this?
So was that in the development of the team coaching competencies, or is that in team coaching in and of itself?
Would you like to specify the question?
Yeah, I think it's both in the team coaching, Joel. What the function of the SME?
And who is the SME?
The persons in the team coaching, they have coach, and then they have somebody who helping the coach to help to facilitate, to provide the feedback to the coach and then to the team member.
So are you talking about like a co-coach?
Yeah, exactly, like a co-coach.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Sorry, I thought that's SME. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay, so we encourage, this came up in the work, the study on team coaching, that so often coaches would use co-coaches. Team coaches would use co-coaches, because when you're present with the team, there's all these dynamics happening. People are talking, having side conversations. And it's hard to be focused on what you're going to do next, or trying to determine what might be the best thing to do. And having a co-coach who's there observing all this can be really, really helpful. And they can act as a supervisor light, basically. And so that's that can be really helpful in that sense, that they're observing for you, and frequently you can switch. So one person coaches one time, the other person observes. Then the other person coaches, the other person observes. And so the team builds trust with both individuals, and you can get the benefit of that sort of witness. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, sure.
Right, we are coming to the end of our time, so we are going to just give Joel a really big, heartfelt thank you